Hey there riders, Moto Journo Kris here today, and I have got Kawasaki Z H2 thanks to Moto Hub in Castle Hill. They've lent me their demo bike for the day, and I've basically taken it for a spin to see really how it stacks up. I have ridden the original H2 and the H2 SX SE, and I gotta say this is far away my favorite. Obviously being a roadster, there's a lot that comes into the roadster side of things, the upright seating position, the fairly naked bodywork that I really like. I do like naked bikes, but at the end of the day, this thing is just absolutely amazing. It's got this great power plant in it, which is supercharged. As I said, 200 horsepower, which, you know, for some people they go, well, I can get a ZX10 with 200 horsepower. Well, you can, but the characteristic of this is totally different. It's a really, really nice power plant. It's a much more everyday power plant despite having a supercharger on it, which I guess is going to be surprising to some people because they think, well, you know, it could be like a turbo Hayabusa or something like that, which, you know, people do to get crazy power figures out of them, but perhaps not that usable in all conditions. Whereas this is ultra usable. What Kawasaki have actually done is just developed this beautiful engine with a supercharger attached to it, and I cannot imagine myself wanting more power than the 200 horsepower here, because really, even having a bit of a crack, I was still only using a portion of that power and only using 3 or 4 gears. There just wasn't an opportunity to use much more than that. And the fueling is exceptional. It's got an up and down quick shifter. It's got a full electronic system as well. And I've got to say, it handled the traffic riding beautifully. And then when you get out onto the open road, it's just exceptional. The smoothness of the power delivery and the fueling is really second to none. I think it's basically up there with the best of anything I've ridden, which is really, really saying something. So an absolutely beautiful power plant in it, and it's really torquey. It's like really meaty, and it's got a nice quick response to the throttle on it. The engine braking is nice and smooth. It's just, it's really hard to describe. Like I said, I recommend going and test riding one of these. As far as the weight, I believe these are 236 kilos wet with a 19-litre tank of fuel in them and various liquids and stuff like that. Do not let that deter you. This bike is absolutely on rails. Sure, it's a bit on the solid side as far as the feel of the bike, because it's a reasonably large bike, reasonably heavy. But once you jump on board, I've got to say that really transforms. It feels beautifully balanced. The way the weight is distributed, not too high despite the look of the bike. Actually, I'd say most of that weight is very, very low. And once you're out riding it, it handles everything really nicely. One of those noticeable things I find on a lot of the big adventure or touring bikes is you feel the weight when you're going through the twisties. And it's not to say that you can't barrel them through quite easily. However, on this, I really didn't feel it at all. Maybe on the brakes a little bit because you are pulling up a bit of bike, but realistically speaking, Kawasaki haven't even put that powerful brakes on this. This has got the M4 Brembo calipers on the front. It hasn't got like the super fancy stylemas. It hasn't got crazy levels of bite. It's got a nice level of bite, really, really progressive power and good stopping power. But Kawasaki haven't gone for, you know, something super duper crazy. These are 25,500 on the road here in Australia. 23 plus on roads is the RRP, so 23,000. And I gotta say, I think this is exceptional value. I actually think it's probably gonna be the kind of bike that if you test ride one and you're interested in even, you know, some of the super sports and things like that, like the big super bikes, the 1000cc super bikes, you should really check one of these out because the performance is staggering, and realistically speaking, the overall package is exceptional. It's really, really good. Now, I do look for the everyday rideability. I'm not the fastest rider, I'm not a racer or anything like that, but this is just ticking all the boxes for me. It's got quite a high-spec suspension system. It's got Showa front and rear. It's got Showa big piston forks, separate function forks as well. And you've got some adjustability there, which is of course nice to see. I found the front end absolutely perfect for me. On the rear, it was a tiny little bit harsh. However, as the speeds rose, it actually got better. And I mean, to be really honest, the harshness I was feeling was really feedback. It wasn't transferring to me as a rider. It was just exceptional feel from that rear end about what was going on the road surface and everything like that. So really, I shouldn't complain at all. And I mean, I haven't adjusted this at all. This is just how I picked it up at Moto Hub, but you know, it is what it is. It's an exceptional package. There's really nothing I can complain about on this bike because I jumped on it and absolutely fell in love. And one of the things is sometimes you jump on a bike and you kind of think, you know, would this be a bike that suits me? And I do like the smaller capacity, even more learner specific bikes. Whereas on this, I'm looking at something that for $25,000 would probably be my top pick at the moment. There's probably a couple of competitors, but the fact this has got a supercharger on it, if I was looking at spending this kind of money, there's really nothing much that would compete with this. Because obviously, as I said, the supercharger is something quite special, but it's also something so usable. And it's got this beautiful kind of like chirp to it as that comes into play. It's got incredible amounts of torque. It's got great brakes. The suspension setup is exceptional. The seating position, it's really relaxed. It's quite neutral. It's nice and upright. Again, it's just such an easy bike to ride. So as you can see here, 830mm seat height, which is, you know, a regular sports bike seat height, I would say. I can get both feet flat. It's a nice reach to the bars. I'm really quite upright. The bars are bent back towards the rider a little bit, but for me, 180 centimeters, 32-inch inseam, the seating position is absolutely perfect. It's natural. When I really want to get into it, that's natural as well, you know, getting in and through the corners and stuff like that. Just it's perfect for me. So obviously that might differ for different size riders, but for me at 180 centimeters, again, really, really perfect. Good vision through the mirrors. I probably could adjust them a little bit more. A nice visible dash, quite simple, but there's a fair bit of information on display. The switch block on the left is quite busy, but with that being said, you use the select button on the right switch block to change the power modes and the traction control, which is simple enough, and you use the mode buttons on the left to toggle through. So realistically speaking, I haven't really dived deep into the electronics because I don't have the bike for that long. It really is something you could spend a full day doing, which I think is unnecessary because really this is a quick test, but I've got to say, as far as the ergonomics, they're ideal. I don't know about putting someone on the back. I think there's room for somebody, but probably not a primary concern for me. However, as a single rider, this is definitely a bike that I really, really am overly impressed with, and I'm quite surprised. It is reasonably wide at the tank between the knees, but I find I can grasp on to the bike quite easily. And actually I'm kind of grasping on between the frame there, the trellis frame, and that panel, which gives it a little bit of extra gripping those two things, which is ideal. Anything else? I mean, not much wind protection, obviously, but it's a naked bike. That's what you're buying, so certainly no complaints there. You've got a hydraulic clutch, reasonably light clutch action as well. You know, it's not like Ninja 400 light, which is just incredibly light, but nice and light. You've got adjustable brake lever and clutch lever there as well. Obviously, of course, the brake is hydraulic, and you know, you get, as I said about the brakes before, it's plenty of power there, perhaps not the most bite, but I think those M4s are well suited to the overall bike and the weight of the bike and really everything. So super impressed by this machine. What else is there worthy of mentioning? Obviously you've got LED headlights, you've got LED indicators. The indicators on the rear work quite well, I think, because they're quite close together. I like the style of them. On the front, they're just too wide, which does kind of upset the balance of the bike, if you ask me, just the placement. But obviously getting your indicators where they're going to be visible and, you know, meet all the ADRs is going to be a challenge. So perhaps you could swap those out for something else. A very small complaint there. I'm going to talk about the styling really quickly. It's such a subjective kind of side of things. I like the look of the bike. It doesn't, you know, bite me as something that I look at and go, I've got to have it, but I really like the way it is designed overall. It carries that Z family heritage, more like the old Z800 heritage, really, really strongly, which I always liked. It was quite unusual. It's a little bit more modern, and it's just a really cool looking machine, an unusual looking machine, but something that I do really like. Jumping back on the bike, it's got quite a reasonable reach between the seat and the pegs, which keeps you quite active. You know, I can get my weight through those pegs really easily. More on the sporty side than the touring side of things, which I like. It's got an up and down quick shifter, works really flawlessly 99% of the time. If you're far too low in a gear, it can have, you know, a little bit of an abrupt change in gears, but you know, I think that's just the limitations of the technology, and realistically, me being a bad rider when that comes into play. So very little to criticize there. I did just remember the one thing I would like to criticize. The rear brake is not that powerful, I found, which it's got a relatively small rotor on the rear. I think it's a 226 rotor. It's got a 2-piston Nissin caliper. For a little bit of, you know, like balance and control, it's okay, but there's just not a heap of stopping power there, which is something I noticed. The other thing I will mention is that this particular bike has a ZX10 exhaust on it, which is why it's got this really nice, like smaller exhaust on it. And I tell you what, the exhaust note on this is beautiful. If you're buying one of these and you're asking yourself what exhaust you could put on that maybe won't cost you the world, because a lot of stock exhausts sell relatively cheaply when someone puts an aftermarket system on, definitely talk to the guys at Moto Hub about what they did with this ZX10 exhaust. It is so good. It's just, when they started up in the showroom, I was like, wow, that sounds absolutely amazing. And they did note at the time, well, yes, that's because it hasn't got the standard enormous bread box on it, but it's cool. It's really, really cool. Okay, so we are talking a $25,000 bike. It's on the pricey end of things, but do I think it's worth it? Well, in the scheme of things, like I said, that's normal in the, you know, the big sports bikes, in the big tourers, in the big adventure bikes, may even really these days be on kind of the lower end of those bikes. And I've got to say, beautiful engine. Beautiful, beautiful engine. Great fueling, supercharger, something unusual. Lots of character added, and it's really something else. You've just got to test ride one. Take it from me, if you get the opportunity, or if you can make the opportunity happen, go and test ride one of these bikes. Great suspension, really nice ergonomics. The seat was a little bit on the hard side, but apart from that, the actual seating position, the peg placement, the bar placement, everything, for me, ideal. Nice dash, nice, you know, LED lights, even though these front ones are a bit of an eyesore for me. The rear, using the same LEDs because they're closer together and a little bit more integrated, that works for me. I like the front end, it's very Z. They've kept this as a real muscle bike, and the styling definitely suits. It's got a good electronics package. Like I said, you know, I tried full power mode, I tried medium power mode, which is 75%. The medium power mode was good up through the tight twisties where it would be easy to get into a bit of trouble, because I love just snapping open that throttle, coming out of the corners, getting a little bit of a run, and you know, I can't complain. That system works well. I didn't do a deep dive into the electronic system, but to be honest, that's the way I prefer it. I like them to be relatively simple, and just there maybe to be a couple of things I tinker with as needed. The low power mode you could use in the rain. Luckily didn't have any rain today. And yeah, just at the end of the day, I really love this bike. And I know, obviously, most bikes I jump on I think are very, very impressive machines, but it does handle like it's on rails. I can't say good enough things about the handling of this bike. Even though it's reasonably heavy, it's like it's on rails. It's got just such a beautiful handling characteristic. It turns much, much nicer than you'd expect a 236 kilo bike to turn. Obviously, the naked bike ergonomics really help there, because they make everything feel funner, if you ask me. And even at lower speeds, you can have a lot more fun. on a naked bike, whereas on a sports bike you sometimes find you have to really be going pretty fast and be pretty committed to get that kind of feel out of it, whereas with this you don't. And of course, again, the torquiness the supercharger provides and this engine configuration provides means it's all super accessible, and to me, again, that's where all the fun comes from. Anyway, as I said, this is the Z H2 demo bike from Moto Hub in Castle Hill. Their address will be up on the screen. Go and demo ride it if you get the chance, because it's a really cool machine, definitely worth checking out, and definitely something that, you know, if you've test ridden one, you can have a bit of a gloat to your mates about having the opportunity to test ride one of these, because I do think it's something really quite special from Kawasaki. And you know, they're kind of leading the way in that supercharged engine. Hopefully some of the other brands do something kind of cool and special like that as well in the future, because it's definitely something that works and it's a great bike. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. As always, sub if you've enjoyed, leave a comment, let me know your thoughts. Do you like the bike? Is there anything about it that might turn you off? Perhaps the styling? Let me know. I'll be back soon. Stay safe out there.